What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Must own running backs in August update. We made this video back in early June, but a lot has changed since then. So it's important for you guys to know which players we still like and who we may not like anymore after their situation has changed. This video is going to go over my favorite running backs to target in drafts. It's not just a list of my favorite running backs in general, or else it would just be my top 10, but rather the guys I'm looking to target the most at their current ADPs. If you enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like. It shows us that you approve of the content. But let's start things off, like always, with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat, no one has gotten yet, but we'll see if someone does. The question was, last season, there were 4 wide receivers with at least 200 slot snaps, but 0 drops. The top 3 were Tyler Lockett, Robert Woods, Doug Baldwin, and then I said who was the 4th? It was Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Today's stat, among running backs with at least 40 attempts from week 10 on last season, there were 3 running backs with at least 4.4 yards per carry after contact per attempt. Derrick Henry, Rashad Penny, and who was the 3rd? Alright, let's start off the list with someone who was on the list last time, remains a target in the first round, is David Johnson. Last season was the absolute worst case scenario for David Johnson. His team struggled to score touchdowns, his quarterback play was terrible, his offensive coordinator was pathetic at coordinating an offense, and despite all of this, he was able to finish as the running back 10 in half PPR leagues, and was the running back 7 from weeks 10 on. This season, the offense will be completely different. They have a new coach in Cliff Kingsbury that wants to lead the league in plays run, and they have first overall pick Kyler Murray, who's a massive upgrade from Josh Rosen, who might not even get the starting job in Miami. Last year, the Cardinals were dead last in points per game, which is 14.1, and they ran the second fewest plays per game. At the very least, they're going to improve upon those numbers. And when I say the offense is going to be completely different, it's how the offense is run. Yeah, they're going to run more plays, they're going to score more points, but they're also going to move the ball with a bunch of short passes, and that just elevates the floor of every player on the offense. Maybe David Johnson doesn't have another 2,100 yard, 20 touchdown season that he had a few years back, but we know the carry numbers will be there. We know the receptions will be there, and we know the touchdowns are going to improve on what they just were. And if all those things happen, he's gonna pay off his ADP, and he's someone you need to be targeting. Remember, he's still just 27, and he has fewer carries in his career than Jordan Howard does. So he's not old. He's not injury prone. Those were freak injuries. He's not worn down. He doesn't have that many carries in his career. So draft him with confidence. Next is Dalvin Cook, and he's played just 15 games over his first 2 seasons, so durability is a concern. I will not sit here and say that Dalvin Cook does not have injury concerns. Sports Injury Predictor has him with elevated injury risk, and I agree. He suffered a torn shoulder, an ankle sprain, another torn shoulder, a torn ACL, and multiple hamstring injuries. But when he's been on the field, he's been electric. He's got a career 4.7 yards per carry, including 3 yards per carry after contact last season. He's also shown, and this is the most important, his receiving upside. He has 3 or more receptions in 73% of his career games. That's huge because there are a lot of running backs that, they're in a great situation. We love their offense, their line, their coaching staff's really good, but they don't have the same receiving upside that Dalvin Cook has. He could legitimately finish with 60 to 70 receptions to go on top of a really nice workload on the ground and all of the goal line work. The Vikings also improved their offensive line by drafting Garrett Bradbury in the first round, which will improve their run blocking. Cook plus Murray last season combined to finish as the running back 6. Madison's a fine rookie running back, but he's nowhere near as talented as Dalvin Cook, and he's purely a backup in case of injuries. He's not going to see much volume at all as long as Dalvin Cook stays healthy. So this is a pick. If you're okay with just a tad bit of injury risk, then he is going to crush as long as he stays healthy. And I know I say avoid all risk early on, but realistically, from where he's going on in drafts, everyone has something. And a lot of the running backs going in his range and after also have their concerns with injuries. So don't think that there's a player going right next to him that has absolutely no risk, because no player really exists without some sort of risk. And if they do, they're going in the top 5. Next is Kareem Johnson, and the big thing you gotta know is Theo Riddick is gone, so draft Kareem Johnson. That's really all he needed last season to catapult him into that upper tier of running backs, because when he was playing, it was always, yeah, he's great, but Theo keeps coming in on 2-minute, and Theo keeps coming in on 3rd down, and when they're down in games, so he's getting the work. He looks really good when he's doing it, but he's just capped. That was always the narrative surrounding him. Well, now he's gone, and they don't have a pass-catching running back. So Kareem Johnson is going to get 2-minute drills. He's going to be the 3rd down back. So could he lose a few carries to CJ Anderson? Could he lose a few touchdowns to him or any other running backs? Absolutely. That could happen, and it should happen. They shouldn't put him out there for 25 carries a game and 7 targets. Like, that's not what really anyone should be getting. And that's not what we want in fantasy, because he's going to break down if he gets that sort of workload. I don't care if CJ Anderson comes in to take 5, 6, 7, 8 carries a game. I don't care, because the carries CJ Anderson gets are going to be the very low upside carries. What Kareem Johnson brings to the table is a dominant pass catching role to go along with a secure role on the ground with touchdown upside. Those are the types of players you want to target. There are guys, like I just said, that have a great role on the ground and are going to get a ton more volume than Kareem Johnson on the ground. But through the air, every single target through the air is worth more than these carries are worth. Last season, he registered an 82% catch percentage, generating 32 receptions in 10 games with Theo Riddick on the roster. That upside is crazy. I believe I have him projected right now for the mid-60s in receptions. And if you want to see my full projection on him along with every single other player you could possibly draft, then head on over to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, and download the rankings and projections. Devonta Freeman is next, and aside from the rankings video where I talked about literally every player, this might be the first time I've talked about Freeman in a few months, and I guess that's a good thing for Freeman since it means he hasn't suffered, a major injury, but I'm sure this comes to a surprise for many of you. I've gone back and forth on if I should recommend drafting Freeman this season, weighing the pros and cons for and against him, but at the end of the day, he's being drafted in a range, like I just said with Dalvin Cook, and he's going a little bit later, so Dalvin Cook's going more in that mid-second to late-second round, whereas Devonta Freeman's going in more like the late 3rd round, but he's going in that range where there are a lot of running backs that have a ton of risk factors associated with them, especially health. I mean, pick a running back in that range and later in the draft that doesn't have a problem with them. So yeah, absolutely, the health is a concern with Devonta Freeman. I mean, he suffered a pulled hamstring, a hip sprain, an MCL sprain, a PCL sprain, a bruised knee, 3 separate concussions, a bruised foot, and then finally, he ended last season with sports hernia surgery. All of these injuries have caused him to not play a full 16 weeks since 2016. But the thing is, he still has well under 1,000 career carries. And again, there are plenty of running backs that also have their concerns, especially with injuries in this range. The other concern people bring up is the offensive coordinator. Dirk Cutter was their OC from 2012 until 2014, hired by the Bucs in 2015, and then served as the Bucs head coach from 16 through 18 before returning this season. Well, how have his teams ranked in rushing yards per game? 27th, 32nd, 24th, 4th, 25th, 27th, 28th. That's obviously less than ideal, but that's only half a concern because who's behind him? I mean, legitimately, name the running backs behind Devonta Freeman. I know we've brought up Ito Smith as a potential, like, in case he gets hurt, but realistically, he was garbage last season. He's been garbage in camp this season, garbage in preseason. Like, there is no clear-cut backup behind Freeman. He is the bona fide number 1 in this offense. They've also heavily invested in the offensive line, drafting 2 offensive linemen in the first round of the draft and signing another 3 in free agency. So they finally have an above-average offensive line, and while he's healthy, he's going to dominate. So since health is legitimately the only concern I have with him, honestly, he's going kind of late. Like, he's going in the late 3rd. Imagine starting your draft with Michael Thomas, Odell, Freeman, and then an early 4th round pick wherever you wanted to go to continue that draft. I mean, that's a really good start, and it's got a lot of upside. So I don't think Freeman should be going as late as he is. Could he get hurt? Sure. But so could every single other running back going in that range. Next is David Montgomery, and I still remember the days where people would hate on the mock draft Mondays when I would draft him in the 5th round. And I miss those days because there's no way in the world he's going to be available at that point anymore. He unfortunately scored a touchdown in the first preseason games, and we all know that whoever scores a touchdown in preseason sees their ADP spike for some ridiculous reason. That's not why we're drafting him. Like, I don't care what he just did in his first preseason game. I wish he had 6 carries for negative 15 yards. Like, I wish that had happened because people would drop him in their drafts. We're drafting him because of how they're going to use him this season, and because of how well he grades out when I project him for slightly less volume than we expect. I mean, they gave Jordan Howard 250 plus carries and 20 or more receptions in each of his first 3 seasons. Well, we know that Montgomery is better on the ground, and he's a much better receiver than Howard is. I mean, this is a kid who holds 1st and 2nd place in missed tackles forced while in college, while also commanding a 71st percentile college target market share. I'm not saying he's an elite NFL running back because he still has a ton to prove, but volume is king in fantasy. And if we give him a slight discount on his expected volume, then he still comes out with my 16th highest projection among running backs. So assuming he gets less work than I think he will, he should be taken 16th. But he's currently being taken 23rd. Explain that one to me. Next running back is Tevin Coleman. Now, Coleman is the lead back on one of the best run offenses in football. The 49ers running backs averaged 4.9 yards per carry last season, and they only won 4 games. So it's not like, they're the Saints or the Chiefs, and teams are scared of the pass, and their yards are just coming from anyone, just anywhere. Just yards for everyone. I mean, Breida and Morris were both top 20 in percent of carries facing 8+ defenders in the box because no one was scared of the pass. And yet, Shanahan was still able to scheme this offense into solid offensive production. Now, imagine what they do with a good quarterback and much improved core of pass catchers. Remember, the majority of running back production, at least on the ground, can be estimated by looking at where they are on the field and how many defenders are in the box. If you face fewer defenders in the box, you're going to be more productive. And it also doesn't hurt that Tevin Coleman is definitely a better running back than Alfred Morris, Wilson, and Mostert. I know I talk about the 49ers a lot, and this isn't the only 49ers running back we're going to talk about in this video, but I have to because the public refuses to give these guys the respect that they deserve. Next is Miles Sanders, and he's currently being drafted as a low-end running back 3 in that mid to late 8th round kind of range. Also currently going behind Jordan Howard, although I do expect him to pass Howard in ADP sometime over this next week or so. But this ADP is still an absolute value. I mean, the worst case scenario when drafting Miles Sanders is that you're drafting the 1B on one of the best offenses in football, running behind one of the best offensive lines, who's going to face an extremely low rate of 8+ defenders in the box, is extremely athletic, and is a plus in the receiving game. That's the worst case scenario, and that player should probably be taken in the 6th or 7th round. His ceiling, though, is completely passing Howard, getting 15 to 17 carries per game, 4 to 5 targets a game, and finishing as a low-end running back 1. Because that's something I want you guys to understand. You don't need 20 carries a game to be a running back 1. He's going to score a good number of touchdowns in that offense if he wins this starting job. So when you combine that with the rushing and with the receiving, he really only needs to get around 15 carries a game to be a running back 1. I mean, last season, among the top 10 running backs in half PPR scoring, just Todd Gurley and Ezekiel Elliott had 17 or more carries per game. Just those two. I think we have this perception in our minds that you need to be a bell cow to be a running back 1, but 8 of the top 10 had fewer than 17 carries per game. So don't let anyone tell you that Sanders can't crush because of Jordan Howard because he's there, because that's simply not true. Would he be better if Jordan Howard weren't there? Well, obviously, yeah, but he'd also be going in the 3rd round of drafts. So be happy that you're getting a discount because he's going to beat him out at some point this season. And for where you're drafting him, that doesn't need to be at the start of the season. Next is Matt Breida, and he marks the second 49ers running back on this list, but I want to make it clear that I probably wouldn't draft both. So if you've already taken Tevin Coleman in the draft, then I'd prefer to take someone, we have ranked close to Breida, even if you're going at the person behind him in our rankings. But I would try and draft one of them in all of your leagues. With Breida coming off the board as the running back 50 or so, it's going to be easier to get him, although I do think the gap in ADP is fair because Coleman is much more likely to be the team's top running back for fantasy. But let's just not forget what Breida did last season. He was top 5 in yards per carry, finishing first in receiving grade among running backs while battling through ankle, shoulder, and knee injuries, and while splitting time with other running backs. They had Morris, they had Mostert, they had Wilson combined for 211 carries, and Morris had 26 red zone carries. So the addition of Tevin Coleman doesn't necessarily mean that Breida is going to see a decrease in his opportunity this season. Plus, the 49ers happen to face the league's easiest schedule in terms of opponent rush defenses. I do want to reiterate that Tevin Coleman is the team's lead back, but that doesn't mean that Breida can't be a useful option for you this season. He didn't get the full workload last season either, and he was still able to finish as a low-end running back too, even with just 3 total rushing touchdowns. Final player we got on the list is Justus Hill, and I love drafting Justus Hill this season. The Ravens are a run-first football team, and they've talked about limiting Lamar Jackson's rushing attempts this season. He's still going to be mobile quarterback. He's still going to run a ton, but he's not going to do it the same amount as he did last year. Mobile quarterbacks are also always a positive for running backs, and last season was no exception. I mean, Gus Edwards had 5.2 yards per carry. It wasn't because Gus Edwards is an amazing running back. It was because this offense was great in how they schemed the running backs the ball. They did sign Mark Ingram in free agency, but this is kind of similar to the Seattle situation. There are enough carries to go around in this offense to support multiple fantasy running backs. But now imagine if something were to happen to Mark Ingram. That sort of upside is scary. Hill is an electric running back and is honestly great in the receiving game. He showed in college also that he's very capable of handling an NFL workload even with his smaller frame. So if he were to pass Mark Ingram on the depth chart, or if Ingram were to just get hurt, then Hill has all the upside in the world. You want to draft cheap players on really good offenses that have a path to starting. That's a proven method of success in fantasy. Find players on really good teams that are going late in drafts and ask yourself, is there a realistic chance to this player becoming a starter this season? And if they are, would they be successful in fantasy? The answer to that question is yes for Justus Hill. He's going to open as the starting third down back, but if you've ever seen this kid run, then there's no way they'll be able to resist using him on some early downs, even right out of the gate. So that's my updated list for must-own running backs. These are the guys that I'd be going out of my way to target in your drafts. It doesn't mean that you should be reaching rounds ahead to draft them, because that would eliminate a lot of their value, but I'd try to get as many of them on your team as possible. Also remember that you can see all of my favorite players to target and which players I'll be avoiding at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button? If you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.